Props. I'm your host, Chelsea Myers, and I am very excited for this conversation today. Over the past several weeks, I've gotten to know our guest today, and I'm just really impressed with. And, John, you've given me some food for thought actually in the realm and aspect of leaders and leadership development and what it actually means to be a contributor to the people and things that we're a part of. So, Dr. John Gordon, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Chelsea. I'm really pleased to be with you. And, as I've gotten to know you over the last couple of weeks, it's really been a pleasure to understand and appreciate what you're doing with your podcast, but also with your dental life coaching. Thank you for making that contribution to the dental community because people like you are needed. And I'm glad you're in this.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm in it too. And, I love the content that you put out on the Fearless Dentistry podcast, and I love the conversations that we've had. I was reflecting back on the story you told me about how you went from one practice. I'm going to have you tell it, but how you had a general dentistry practice and then the transition, that whole experience of deciding what it was you wanted and what that looked like. Would you mind telling that story? Because I just think it's so great.
Yeah. I had a general practice for probably, I'm going to say 18, 19, 20 years, somewhere in there, Chelsea, and I really enjoyed the general practice aspect. I became exposed to, though, the cosmetic dentistry at that point is basically all that we called it. And I learned the value of doing exceptional cosmetic dental work for people. And I knew that I wanted, and it just became so compelling. I needed to do it. I at that point, I felt like I had the technical skills, definitely, but making the actual transition, a lot of dentists and a lot of people suffer from the imposter syndrome. And the imposter syndrome, once we start with the mindset with that, it's really hard to overcome. So, I'd studied under some of the absolute best cosmetic dentists, I'm going to say, in the world. So if I was going to do something and learn something, I wanted to go and be exposed to the best. And so I studied under two gentlemen in particular, Jeff Morley and Jimmy Eubanks, two doctors of the original 12 founders of the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. And it was an intense 3-month time period with those gentlemen, but I learned a tremendous amount. Again, the desire and the want became so overwhelmingly compelling for me. I needed to do it. So part of my belief system is, when was yesterday a good time to do it? So my work week was Monday morning from 8 until Thursday afternoon at 1. And on Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock, not 1 o'clock, probably about 2 o'clock, once we finished up the day and the week, I left my practice, I closed my back door, and I said to myself, John, your general practice is closed. And over the weekend, I role played and I rehearsed in my mind, and I asked questions after questions. And this main question lingered with me all weekend. And I really didn't know how to answer it because I knew a great newness and excitement awaited for me Monday morning. I wonder what it's going to feel like. I wonder what it's going to feel like to walk in there and say to myself all day, John, you are now a cosmetic dentist. Was I going to be a different person? Was I going to have a different posture about myself? Was I going to have a different presence about myself? What is it going to feel like emotionally and physically? So I lingered with that question all weekend. And I walked in Monday morning, 7:15, to get ready for our huddle meeting at 7:30. And I opened the door and said, John, you are now a cosmetic dentist. Again, the imposter syndrome was there a little bit because I really hadn't done a lot of cosmetic dental work. But what was so surprising to me, Chelsea, was just with that mindset. I looked at my staff different. I looked at each patient in hygiene different. And I looked at all my operative patients different. I looked at them from standpoint of what is their opportunity in life. If I ask them a question about their smile, what can I do to help them in making their smile more pretty? And what will, or handsome, what would that do to their life? And so the first day, at the end of that first day, I was shocked. I was blown away because I actually looked at each hygiene patient, their teeth and their smile different. I looked at the front tooth and I said, asked myself, what would the whole mouth look like if I could make that one tooth just so absolutely beautiful that the patient wanted to make all the rest of their teeth match the beauty? What would it change with this person? So at the end of the day, it's kind of like, wow, this is awesome. This is what it's about. I've got to do this every day.
Gosh, that story is so powerful to me. And I love the component you bring and share about the mental rehearsal of becoming that new star of your show. You know, I think so often we act as an extra in our own movie, not realizing that we are creating every experience that we have, that we are an active contributor to those experiences. And this mental rehearsal concept isn't new. Take athletes, for example. It's widely known that they spend a significant portion of their time envisioning hitting the ball over and over and over again. But we need to apply that same principle into our own lives and really be intentional about where we're spending our thought space, because as long as we've got a beating heart, our thoughts are going to continue to take place. And if we're not really strategic about how we're using them, they contribute to results that we don't want, and they repeat over and over again. And so I love the way you did there. That was just so amazing. And you ran through, I coach my clients on this. You anticipated, what are the objections going to be? What are the questions going to be? What's my response going to be? What's my tone when I say it? What's my posture? How do I feel as those words are coming out of my mouth? And that's just so beautiful. I love, it gives me chills just thinking about that.
Yeah. You know, it was a scary adventure for me at first, because it's one of those things I really had no idea what to anticipate and what I was going to experience. But by lunch, I knew that this is where I belonged. And it took me a while to figure out where I belonged. You know, I shared with you earlier that I went through the Pankey Institute and I learned a tremendous amount, but I still couldn't figure out where John Gordon as a dentist belonged. I knew that I had technical skills that were ones that, to the point to where I could respect my work myself. I wanted my work, when it went out to other offices, to make a statement about who John Gordon is as an individual by the quality of my work. I knew that I had those skills, but I didn't know what to expect experientially. And I didn't really, the other thing, Chelsea, that I knew that by going into cosmetic dentistry and then going into lifestyle dentistry, I started marketing externally, which, you know, at that point in the mid 90s was kind of a no. But the people that I marketed with, marketing agencies, I said, I want to market as such that none of my colleagues, none of my fellow dentists could criticize what I said and the way that I said it and the way I presented it. And that was very important to me. So I kept my marketing very simple, very uncluttered. The message was clear. It was easy to understand. And I was proud of the marketing message that we put out there. In doing so, it helped me, again, refine my experience But the thing that was interesting to me was the people that were responding to my marketing message. Um, when I went through Dawson Institute, one of Pete Dawson's big thing is if you build this, kind of like the movie, if you build it, they will come. No, it didn't happen. And that was kind of the same axiom in theory with the Pankey Institute. If you know how to do this industry, people will come. That didn't work. So I knew I needed to put a message out there so people would see what I had to offer and then come. And the type of people that came provided me with an awesome learning experience to where I grew, we talked about earlier, skill sets in communication. These people needed a significantly different skill set, communication skills in approaching them to where when they came in, I could establish trust with them as quickly as possible. Again, it's a good friend of mine. I think you may know him, Dr. Paul Homley. He said, John, take this appropriately, but people want to be treated and streeted. Don't waste their time. And today, that is so very important. We covet our time and don't waste it. So get to the point of developing relationships. Well, how do you do that? Well, we talked earlier about being confident, being aware of who you are and where you are, and exercising great communication. So that's where I knew I had to go. And I have a little thought in my mind that I would always tell myself, when was yesterday a great time for me to start doing this? And that always propelled me, John, do not waste time. Get after it.
Yeah. And I think it's like the quadrants of decisions, right? You've got the urgent and important, and then you've got the non-urgent and important. And that quadrant is where, choosing to develop in a certain area or grow our business in a certain way usually falls. It's not, the house isn't on fire. We don't have to do this in this moment. And those decisions are the easiest to procrastinate, because as important as they are for our personal development, for the people that we're going to impact once it's built, there's not always, and usually isn't, a time constraint that we have to follow. It's up to us how much perseverance we put into it. It's up to us how often and actively we work on it, which is why they become such great personal developers, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that propelled me, Chelsea, was when I really, with tenacity, worked and understood the value of great communication. I put at the forefront of my practice story. There's storytelling and there's story listening. All too often, when I go out and speak to dentists, or I speak with them on an individual basis afterwards, they want to tell their story. And I learned early on that the only thing that I need to tell about my story to the patients that come to me for cosmetic or lifestyle dentistry is I need to tell my story as quickly and succinctly as possible in a manner to where I build trust and a friendship with them, so that they feel like they can become vulnerable with me and I can become vulnerable with them, to where we can really work together. And that was one of the greatest things that I saw happen when I went into this style of dentistry, were the relationships that I built. And these patients would stay on with me a long time. I felt so strongly about being able to help these people that and this isn't an ego thing at all, because that's not where I came from with my practice. My practice had a purpose, and that was to help people realize their greatness, just as you are with your business, Chelsea. We understand and appreciate that there is a seed of greatness inside of everybody. It just needs to be nurtured. It needs to be taken care of. So I looked at these patients coming to me, and most of them came in with a degree of humiliation, shame, embarrassment, total lack of confidence. Their mindset, the narratives they were telling themselves was not good. And they were looking for hope. I felt like with my marketing, I needed to get the message out there because they needed me. Because I was a person that would really sit and listen to these people. And it was something that I could not wait. When I saw that I had a new patient on my schedule during the day, I could not wait to go in and meet them. Because after a few minutes, I could start to see their face do what you're doing, the smile. You can see that sincere smile of like, whoa, someone finally gets me. And all I had to do, Chelsea, was ask a couple of questions, shut up, and listen to their story. The greatest story that we want to listen to is ours being told to somebody else, to someone that will listen and appreciate and respect us. And that's what I felt like I finally learned to be able to do.
That's so interesting that you put it that way, because I think you're right. I think, first of all, just the general topic of communication is really unsettling to a lot of people. If we're going to do a communication training, or we're going to gauge ourselves on how well we are as communicators, people don't really like to go there very often, particularly in dentistry. But then you're right. There are a lot of people who, and particularly entrepreneurial spirited ones, who are comfortable communicating. And in those cases, it becomes the listening that's the area of opportunity, which is what you're describing. Because when you're actively listening, and you're listening in a way that allows you to make the type of impact that we're capable of making, that means you're listening both to what's being said and to what's not being said, and you're able to contribute in those ways. I find that the more skillful the listener, the less they need to talk, and the more powerful the questions that are being asked. That's where the discovery and the connection can really begin to take place.
That's exactly what I discovered, Chelsea, and you hit it right on the head, is the ability to listen. And your next question comes out of your listening, because the patient is telling you everything that you need to know in the direction that they want you to go with them. Patients don't want to come in and be manhandled. They don't want to be pushed in a direction that they don't want to go. We all are when I'm any place and I'm being pushed in a direction, I resist. I put up a fight in not wanting to go into that direction. But when someone asks me questions about myself, I'm so willing to share about myself that it develops a relationship that just really is fun. And that was my main objective, was to see how quickly I could build that relationship. And you would see it I would see it in the patient's face the second that started to occur. Their body language would change, the facial expression, the angst, the fear. I realized that patients don't leave their life in the automobile in the parking lot when they come in to see you. And respecting that and knowing that, John, that this new guest today, this isn't the most important thing in their life today. There's outside things out there. So find out what those are and respect that, and then move forward. Again, it was just such an opportunity every day to learn about these people. I just loved it. Just loved it. And that was the hardest thing for me to leave behind, Chelsea, when I retired. because I just so look forward to it. So what I've put in that place is LinkedIn, where I found you.
Hey, I actually think that's a really important topic. Could we go there for a minute? Because in my
Sure.
experience, when you are departing from one aspect of your life that's become everything, you build your whole life around your practice and your team and your patients, and
Yeah,
it's very much in the fiber of who you identify with.
absolutely.
I've seen and observed that there's what I'm going to describe as a grief process of
Yes.
leaving that and moving on. Can you talk about that piece?
I'm glad you brought that up, Chelsea, because we don't just do that when we retire. There are life situations that present us, and you shared with me earlier about your experience with your father and how that totally changed who you were and the trajectory in your life. We have things that happen to us within our own life that are a pivotal moment in time where we have to make a decision. And I knew my family and my children were saying, "Dad, you need to retire," and I'm going, no, I still have a purpose. I have people out there that I want to meet, and I feel like there are still people out there that need to meet me. And as long as I felt strongly with that, I was going to stay in dentistry. I loved my practice, Chelsea, until the very last second that I walked out that last day. And I loved it even afterwards. And so it happened, it occurred right after the shutdown of COVID. And so COVID gave me a little bit, the shutdown time period gave me a little bit of an exposure as to what I was going to experience. And during COVID, at first, it was kind of like my days were set, my my time stamps of the week were set, but that was all gone. We didn't go to church on Sunday, and so Sunday felt like Wednesday. And I would, for the first time in my life, I would wake up in the morning and go, "What is today?" My life stamps were gone. And so I had a little bit of an inkling of what it was going to feel like. And so when I stepped out that last day, I was still in love with dentistry. I was still in love with the concept of the opportunity to make it, as Steve Jobs said, put a dent in people's. And this, my last day was just before Christmas. So we had our normal Christmas downtime, had New Year's, and then the first day after the New Year's, with which I would have gone back into my practice, came about. I didn't go. And the next day I didn't go. And it's kind of like, there's something wrong here. My body still wanted to get up in the morning and get up early and take the shower and prepare myself for the day and get going. But I wasn't able to do that. After a week, grief started to set in. I was mourning the loss of something that I dearly loved, and that was my dentistry. And it took a little while for me to acclimate to that. And I realized after a while, Chelsea, though, that I still have energy and passion for doing something for people and for someone. I was retired, but willing and ready to put my book on the shelf. And so I really started amping up my podcasting. And the more I was doing that, I was getting feedback. Then I was getting invitation to do this and do that. And I went on to LinkedIn. And the thing about LinkedIn, that I had LinkedIn for years and I never really did much with it. And then I buffed up my bio and whatever, and I started meeting people, and consequently, you and I met. And this has been a good friendship that we've developed. But it was tough, and there was a mourning, and there was a real loss there, and trying to find out, what do I do next? And that was the thing that in visiting with other dentists and patients in my practice, when they were getting ready to retire, they were scared to death because they did not know what to do. I have a brother-in-law scared to death to retire because he doesn't have anything to do. And so it's a mindset, Chelsea, and a lot of that, our mindset is our choice, and how we move forward with it. And so I realigned my mindset. I said, "Okay, John, you're retired, but you're not quitting." And so I refigured, and I decided that the areas in my life that I could go out and continue to make a contribution. But there's definitely that phase that you go into where you have grief, to where you feel irrelevant. And the word irrelevant was a big part of the adjectives that I came away with time and time again with the patients that came in to see me for cosmetic dentistry, because their life had fallen into a point to where they were feeling irrelevant to themselves, surprisingly, but also to the people around them and their family and in their job. And so we were trying to help them gain relevancy again. And so it's kind of like, okay, big boy, it's your turn. You've got to recreate your relevancy and your value and what you want to contribute. And that took work. That took work. Did I
Oh
help
my
you at all with
gosh.
that answer?
Yeah, it's the best kind of work because I think so often, we identify ourselves as our title or our credentials or our years of work experience. Sometimes it's our zip code or where we vacation. And those are just accessories. Those are just what we do. That's not who we are. And so what you're
Right.
describing is the really introspective work of discovering who you are in this next phase of life. And I love that. That is just so powerful. Um, when you were talking about mourning and the grief process, it made me think two things. One, if someone is or is about to go through this, perhaps with that analogy in place, we can recognize, okay, so we've all lost someone or something that we've loved at this point in our lives. And so this isn't brand new. We've done it before and we can do it again. But I think more important and more to the point of what you're saying is whether you have or haven't, you can do it. This isn't actually life or death. This is something that you can do and to a great degree have a lot of control over what that looks like and what those outcomes become. For you, it's been continuing to make, I would argue, the same level, if not a more massive impact, because through technology and your podcasting and the mentorship that not just touches each doctor that you work with, but the doctors and patients that they work with, we're able to really expand our reach. And so the relevancy only increases.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that about the doctors. Is that again, we go back to your podcast, um, crops, dental brain crops. You explained that to me. I had to ask you, tell me about the title. And it made a lot of sense when you shared that with me. And it's, again, I alluded to it earlier, that little grain, that little seed of greatness inside of us needs to be fostered. And I think with dentists, and this is what I did with my staff, as I mentioned earlier, is helping my staff create or understand their greatness and their potential. And doctors, and what we're trying to do together jointly and how in what we do for the dental industry is helping these doctors understand the impact and the greatness that they can carry forward into their practice every day that can make a big difference with their staff and the patients, and to not shy away from that opportunity. Don't be afraid of it. Learn how to communicate with your patients effectively. Learn how to become the leader. We talked earlier about the leader brings the weather, and bring sunshine, bring blue skies. Don't bring in clouds, the thunder, and the lightning. Create the culture that you want, but look at every patient with an awesome excitement of making a difference with that individual. And that's what I love about your approach with your consulting, Chelsea, is that's where you're coming from with this. And um, I love our time together and our visits and our conversations.
Me as well. Thank you. Me as well. When you were talking about the leader brings the weather, I was thinking how so often we can accidentally fall into this trap. And, you know, I study this for a living, and I can fall into this trap if I'm not careful of becoming a casualty of the environment around me, becoming more the temperature gauge rather than the thermostat. And it is so important to recognize that we always only are ever a leader. And it is our job to set that tone. And it is our job when it's off kilter to go in and balance things out, because nobody's going to do it for us. It's our job. So either we have a missed opportunity or it gets corrected. But we can't be, it's like looking at your children to appropriately run your household. Well, that's not their job. It's your job, right? No matter what chaos may be going on. And we really need to be able to step in and take control of that situation, which requires a high degree of self-control and managing our emotions, regardless of whatever insecurities may be showing up as we approach that situation, or hesitations we may have based on past experiences. You know, I was just talking to my husband about this. I really think that we have the opportunity to choose which industry we're going to go into and where we're going to live and how we're going to dress. What we're really selecting is our curriculum, our personal development curriculum. You and I have chosen dentistry, but it's really not about the dentistry that we do or the clients that I coach. It's really about how I bring an impact to every situation and the open and willingness I have to developing further from it. And if we can approach it that way, there is such an abundance of beauty and an abundance of opportunity to create an impact as well as be impacted. And that simultaneous transference is incredible.
You know, that's a great way of looking at it. I've never looked at it that way, Chelsea. You know, it is a decision and it's a mindset. I looked at every day when I walked into that practice. See, we have a choice as a doctor, as the dentist. We decided to go into dentistry for a reason. But I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, no one ever went into dentistry to say, I'm going to become an absolute phenomenal leader. No, that wasn't their decision. That wasn't the reason why. But by going into dentistry and opening up a practice or becoming an associate and wanting to become the head dentist, you made a decision. And along with that decision came something that maybe you weren't aware that you were deciding upon, but you decided to become a leader. Mm-hmm. And you have the opportunity to take that leadership role and really run with it. And as you mentioned, when we graduated from dental school, we were enrolling, I love this analogy, never thought of it, our future curriculum, our growth path. And there's so many opportunities out there for us. And the sooner that someone learns and appreciates that they have waiting ahead of them the opportunity to become a leader. But here's where I feel like the obligation comes in for the doctors and the dentists is do not shy away from that. Do not, I'm going to use the word be a coward about it. I think becoming a leader takes tremendous courage and commitment. But here's the bottom line, Chelsea, that I look at. Every patient that comes into my practice that day deserves my absolute best when I am with them personally in that operatory, getting ready to engage with them. They deserve my best. They don't deserve what was left over from the night before at home and my pissy attitude and, you know, my belligerent angst about maybe my favorite college team lost over the weekend and I am just mad as heck about it. Or maybe someone cut me off on the way to the office in the morning and I got really pissed off about it. No one deserves that attitude. Those people come in with fears and apprehensions at an escalated level, they don't need you raining more on them. They deserve my absolute best. And if you're not willing to accept that, then don't walk into the operatory. If you're not willing to accept that responsibility and that you need to raise your leadership level, don't even walk in the back door. Do something, give yourself the opportunity to realign your mindset and then enter the back door of your office that day, because your patients deserve it and your staff deserves it. Just because you're the doctor doesn't give you the right to bring in the thunderstorm and the lightning. I heard something a couple of weeks ago, Chelsea, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, that the probability of you and of me being born, I was blown away by this. The probability of every individual being born is 1 in 400 trillion.
Wow.
That's a mind-blowing number. I heard this morning that if you took a stack of $1,000 bills and you put it on your hand, in order to reach $1 trillion worth, you would have to have a stack of $1,000 bills 60 miles high. Now look at the probability of being born, 1 in 400 trillion. Now that goes way, way back of the probability of, let's just go back to my grandparents, the probability of my grandfather meeting my grandmother. Okay, that happened. The probability of having that one moment in time to where they were able to create my mom and the others, my dad, that happened. So the one moment in time where my parents had the opportunity to create me, maybe my dad would have been out of town that day. So you look at the probability. We look at life as like, this is my life. I can step on anybody I want. I can manipulate anybody I want. I can do anything I want. Look at it as the phenomenal gift that it is. And then take that responsibility of that gift of your life, take it to the max, and have a wonderful impact upon the gift of the life of the person that is before you. That's the way that I looked at my patients from that perspective. And it kept everything in perspective for me, Chelsea, that them having an interaction with me, what is the possibility of that happening? Don't waste it. Take it to the max. That's what I loved about my practice.
Wow. It must have been such an incredible experience being in your practice in any capacity. I can just feel that energy coming through. One of my favorite realities of life is that you can restart your day at any point in your day. I don't know who had this idea like, well, let me sleep on it and get back to you tomorrow, or let me just wait till I'm in a better mood on another day. I'm like, I was thinking about that one day or a couple years ago, and I was like, this makes no sense. I think that I need to start teaching a principle or the practice of pause. And I know that you and I talked earlier today, and you were saying, before you went into each hygiene check, you would pause and get into the right frame of mind for that next activity. And I think that that's what you're describing here. If we are going to walk through the door at home and we're not in a good place, or walk through the door at work and we're not in a good place, or it's our turn with the cashier and we're not in a good place, we can literally take a pause, take some breaths, and change, start our day over right now, have a new type of day starting right now. We don't have to complete the duration of our waking hours today in that same painful and uncomfortable state of mind. That's completely elective.
Yeah. One thing that I started doing, Chelsea, after the pandemic was when I would go out and say the grocery store or Menards, Lowe's, whatever, the people that were helping you and working there had name tags. Mm-hmm. And so I would always make an effort of finding out what that person's name was, at the cashier. And then I would walk up and say, well, hi, Chelsea, how's your day going today? And they'd kind of go, whoa, okay. When you use someone's first name in the conversation as soon as you know it, it makes a huge difference. You're acknowledging them as individuals. It was really interesting. And if our listeners, I challenge them to go out and try that. It does a couple of things. It awakens that person that you're interacting with immediately. And it shows them that you're with them. You're there.
Mhm.
The other thing that it does is it raises your level of interaction with them also. And that's what I just look for, things that allow me the opportunity to be a better person right then and there. When I'm on walks and I pass someone, I always wave and always say hi. Sometimes they'll walk by me, not even acknowledge me, but I'm always saying hi to them. And it's an opportunity to possibly change someone's day, that moment. Not, oh, I'm going to go home and sleep on this and hope that maybe we pass tomorrow. No, I agree. I don't like that. When someone says that to me, that's a cop out, and I'm not much for
Mhm.
copping out.
I know that you're not. That comes through in everything that you say. I actually
Yeah,
really enjoy it.
yeah,
And I love that is a tangible. I like the challenge that you're giving our listeners. Use somebody's name today, whoever you're talking to. Use their name a couple of times based on the length of your conversation. It's been
yeah.
said that the sweetest sound you ever hear is the sound of your own name, right?
You know,
So,
and I believe that's true. I really do. I read a book not long ago, well, a few years back, on why people buy you. And the emphasis in that was, if you're going to communicate with someone and win them over, learn their first name as quickly as possible and use it as soon as you know it, and use it the appropriate amount of times during the conversation. You can overuse it to where it feels fake and synthetic.
mhm.
But once you know their name, use it. Secondly, is listen for what their problem is. Ask great questions. Then, once you know what their issue is, provide a solution for their problem. You do those three things, you're going to win 99% of the time. And when I mean win, you're going to be able to work together with this person in a way that contributes to their life in overcoming the obstacle as they see it.
So, what do you say to the person that is insecure, uncomfortable? They'd really rather have as minimal conversation as possible. And that insecurity is getting in the way of having those rich conversations.
Yeah. Um, that was me, Chelsea, when I first started in dentistry. And the first thing I wouldn't force an issue and try to embarrass them or insult them or further humiliate them, because there's something in their past that has taught them that this is the way that they need to be to survive and prevent something from occurring again to them that made a big impact on them when they were younger. And so it's appreciating who they are and accepting them where they're at. But then I have the opportunity then to share my story with them and go, okay, that's who I was. I understand where you're at, but there's such a beautiful thing on the other side of your fear. Fear for me, I look at it, the old acronym, we all know it: face everything and run. And I look at fear as fearlessly engage anything relentlessly. And so it's a little bit of a mindset of just understanding and appreciate that there's so much out there yet. Here's what I learned also. I'm an avid reader, as I am sure that you are also. That's one thing that I've found that is a common thread between entrepreneurs, is that we're just avid readers. I read the book, The Aladdin Factor, years ago. Camfield is the author. And he said, our fears prevent us from enjoying such a rich life. And through his research, he found that our fears that we put before us that prevent us from progressing only are a reality 2% of the time. And he said, of that 2%, it is such a small percent that our fears become a reality that is infinitesimal, that it really happens. So he says, why are you allowing that 2% to control 98% of your life? And when I read that, I'm going, whoa, that is huge. So I would encourage them to really kind of look at that fear and engage with me, and let's work together in overcoming that. Seek someone that is sympathetic and empathetic to you to overcoming that fear and helping you understand it better, and realize that that's not going to be the case in the future, because I experienced that fear when I was young, and it prevented me from speaking up, sharing my opinion, for fact of rejection and humiliation and being laughed at. And I knew that that's not the way I wanted to live, Chelsea. And so I just had to do something about it.
And there's just this tremendous empowerment and growth that comes when you move toward the fear and give yourself that opportunity to see. I think so often we focus on what we're afraid of that we forget to at least consider the other possibilities that could happen in that situation. And if there's 2% worst case, there's 2% slightly better and 2% even better than that. I mean, there's so many different outcomes that can take place, and we're just so heavily focused on that one. And I think the other thing is that we really freak ourselves out about being afraid. Being afraid has this compounding effect where it's just fear, but you can do things while you're afraid. You can talk to someone while you're afraid. You can take action while you're afraid. I was coaching a practice recently, and we had a group of us talking, and the doctor was describing how he had a patient in his chair, and it was a minor, and the mom was sitting there too. And he said, I looked at the patient's mouth and saw what I needed to see. And then I really clammed up because I needed to share what I was recommending. And I was really afraid of sharing what I was recommending because I didn't want to be the bad guy in that situation. And somebody spoke up and she said, can I just share as a patient of children what I would be thinking? I would be nervous about what you're going to say, not because you're going to be the bad guy. I would be thinking, I was being judged. Why haven't I cared for my minor child's teeth? And when she said that, you could just see the relief. He had never considered that there was another way that this parent might interpret what he needed to share with his patients. Yeah. And so, it's just those differing perspectives that we don't even try on to figure out how likely is this one? How possible is that favorable outcome? We don't even try them on because we're just so attached to the 2%, that fearful outcome, and it's just overwhelming.
Yes. You are so correct in that judgment. And that was one of the biggest things that happened, and I think was a big fear factor for my cosmetic patients and lifestyle patients was, and in fact, I know it was the fear of judgment. And as early on in the conversation as I felt it was appropriate, I would look the patient in the eye and tell them, you will never be judged by me. I think you are tremendously courageous to come in here and be vulnerable with me, knowing that there's a possibility of being judged. And I know that you are fearful of being judged because it has happened to you time and time and time again with how you present yourself because of your smile and your teeth. But I will never, ever do that to you here. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you dream and vision. And I would tell them, I know that you have visioned your life with a beautiful smile. And I would ask them to share that with me. And when they would share that, they changed. They changed. And when I shared with them that they would not be judged and that we were going to work together, that was a huge defining moment with them in their relationship with me. And it was at that point I knew we were going to have some dentistry done. the focus was always the patient, always the patient. And those conversations, if I hadn't learned how to ask questions and kind of guide and direct the patient to face their fear, you know, we need to be a fireman, because firemen run to the fire. They don't, and everybody is afraid of fire. You know, we have to respect fire. And if it's a huge building on fire, we are afraid of it. But guess what? Firemen run to the fire because that's their duty, to put out the fire, and the fire is fear. And if we run to the fear of the patient and acknowledge that fear with them, they look at us and they start to respect us immediately for the person. They want to be led, and they want a strong leader. Every patient that comes to us in our dental practices wants to be led through the process. So step up, buddies and gals, and be the leaders that you need to be. Take them to the fire and let them enjoy the other side.
Yes. You know, and there are so many opportunities to access resources and mentors and people who can get you what it is that you're needing to close those gaps between where you are and where you want to go. We just need to do the work, which is to ask. That's really the heaviest lifting we're going to have to do in that process. But I know you, John, are more than happy to help in any way that you can, and provide that access to resources. So you've got the Fearless Dentistry podcast. Where else can people go if they want to learn more about you and the work that you're still doing?
What they can do, Chelsea, is go to fearlessdentistrypodcast.com, and that will be my landing page website, and they can learn more about me there. And then
Perfect.
They can tune into the Fearless Dentistry podcast on all of the podcast broadcasting sites. So that's how they can get a hold of me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. This was just a joy. It always is talking with you, and I love that we were able to make this work today.
Thank you, Chelsea. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you.
You too.